Hi everyone. Today we get to talk about and draw and paint a snapping turtle. So I chose that kind of turtle today because we've done the Western pond turtle a few months back. And also this snapping turtle is native to Colorado. It comes as far west as Colorado. So you might happen to see one if you're near a river, a pond, or a lake. They're also on the East Coast and in the South. They have these strong beaks, pointed beaks that are good in its role as a predator, going after prey. It eats insects, crabs, fish, frogs, birds, snakes, and plants. It's not something that would go chasing after humans, but you wouldn't want to get too close to that powerful beak and jaws. So we'll go ahead and get started writing and drawing. And remember, with nature journaling, it can be as much about writing as about drawing. The two go hand in hand. So we will write out our title, and I'll just use a greenish color that could be found on a snapping turtle. I'm using a colored pencil. We've talked about making the titles fun. You could figure out ways you might want to decorate your title some more. So something you can do just to make letters look more interesting is on any stroke that you would go down, you can just thicken that up. So that would be thinner because I'm going back up. Then this would be thick, a little bit thinner, thick because it's going down, thinner across, thick, and then the down part of this E would be thicker. So I'll go back to the S. As it goes down on that curve, it could be thicker, thinner, thicker, thin up here, thick because it's going down, thick, thicker, thicker, thick over here, thick over here. So just think, anytime you're going down and you want your letters to look a little special, just use a thicker downstroke. And that's a basic method of calligraphy, which it takes some studying and practice, but this is just kind of a basic thing you can do. Okay, that was just kind of a little side note of a way you can make your letters more interesting and appealing. So the Latin or scientific name is Chelydra, Cheladra serpentina. And you can go ahead and write your date, whatever date you are working on this in May something, 2022. It's kind of fun to have maybe the date, the year be the same width as the month and day. And again, you can put it in a box if you want. Kind of make it a little to stand out. All right. So the turtles are reptiles, and that means that part of the definition is that they lay eggs and they depend on their environment for their temperature. So they don't control their inner temperature like mammals do, like we do. So it's a reptile. And the snapping turtle is found in the U.S. from the east coast to the south, as far west as Colorado. If anybody has seen one in real life, I would love to hear about that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and draw our snapping turtle. You can look on in your book, again, Fun with Nature, on page 81 for reference. With your parents, you could look up other pictures if you want, or maybe you could find one at a local museum. I'm not sure if they have them like at the Bear Creek Center or Fountain Valley Center, Fountain Creek Nature Center. Anyway, it's on page 81, and this is one of the references I'm looking at. Okay, so we will draw the shell. Now this isn't going to be life size for when a turtle is really big. A snapping turtle can get to be 36 to 50 centimeters longer than this ruler. Its height. This could be like if it was could be a young turtle, but I'm just going to draw a basic curve for the shell, not too curvy, and then the shell, the bottom of the shell, and then I'm going to draw the ridge of the shell, and then at the back of the turtle you can see a snapping turtle. You can see that there's these like kind of pointy, kind of triangular, jagged edges that that make up the back part of the shell, and then they kind of turn into just straight edges down here along the ridge. Okay, so now we're going to draw what's called the scutes, the plates that are part of the shell. I'm going to just draw a basic line for my guideline. Now if we were going to look at the shell from the top, the basic shape would be each one of these little plates is called a scute, and it would basically be 5 going down in the middle, and then 4 of these scutes on either side. So this is like looking at it from the top. So this is a basic pattern of turtle shells, and then the ridge around. So I'm going to start out with my middle scute. It's not totally rectangular, but that's the basic shape. And then there's 1 here, 2, 3 going down to the ridge, 4, and then 5. And then there's, but I didn't make these wide enough, so I'm going to make them bigger. That's why I had this guideline, but I wasn't following it. So again, that's why how we can use a pencil to help us. I'm going to make this a little bit shallower. So I'm going to erase that part. It's not a very good eraser. So if you're drawing with a pencil, it's fine to use the eraser to adjust anything that needs to be fixed. And sometimes you want to use like pen and ink or something and just not be as concerned about the details, but it's nice to have the option to adjust things as you figure things out. So there's 1, 2, 3, and then this 4th one, 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down the middle, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 4 down either side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So then we can draw the head, we can draw the neck. My little diagram's kind of in the way, but the neck is kind of wrinkly, so the turtle can easily poke its head in or out of the shell. Then it has a curve up here for the top of the head, and then this beak that helps it to go after its prey. So it's a sharper curve, and then a point, and then another curve in and around and down a little bit, and then I could just kind of overlap my little drawing. And then there's it's an open mouth, like he's going after something. Then his eye is right behind the beak, and it has a ring around it with a center, and then some little spokes going out, and then spokes going around the outer ring. And it has some texture on it, and it might even have some algae attached to it, as it serves as a good form of camouflage. And because the turtle could often be found along the muddy bottom and collect algae down there, as well as swimming along the top. In the picture we have in our book, it shows a water lily, and that's what we're going to be working on next week. Okay, so we have the head, and we can put some more texture in there, and then we have a long tail. And then this tail has like saw-like little triangles along the top, and as they get down to the end of the tail, they get smaller. It also has some texture of kind of ridges. Okay. And we have the bottom of the shell, the bottom shell. Here's the top and the bottom, and I'll give you the names of those. We talked about them with the western pond turtles as well. Now we're going to draw in those legs that poke out from between the top shell and the bottom shell. And they're kind of thick, the top, and they are also kind of wrinkly. And then they have these feet that are webbed, good for swimming, and they also have, each of them have 5 claws on each of their feet. We could have another one kind of poking out from the other side. We've talked about elements of art a lot. This is one of the elements of art, is space, trying to show that two-dimensional flat objects in a drawing are representing three-dimensional spaces with form. That's another element of art. We'll just write that down. I'm just talking about space. One behind the other, overlapping, helps us to show space. And also it can help us to show form, which is another element of art. I just keep talking about these because it just helps you understand what you're drawing. And also when you're looking at other art, you can see how these different elements of art are part of any artwork or drawing that is impactful. Value is how light or dark something is. Right now we don't have much value because we haven't painted it or added shading or anything. We have color, which we'll add, and then we're kind of going an opposite way that I normally talk about. And then line is what we use to make the shape of the animal, and then this animal or whatever we're drawing. And then texture, we've put a little bit of texture in with some of these lines on the tail and some of these lines on the head. We can do some more. There's also some lines going this way on the turtle. and having it be a little bit ridged here shows some texture too. So all of these are important to know about elements of art. Together they're what make up a good drawing or painting. Now we'll add in the front legs. Again, they can be a little bit wrinkly, and they're going to have their 5 claws, 2, 3, 4, 5. And here's another one coming from the other side, the other leg, just kind of overlapping, and maybe we wouldn't see those other claws so much. And sometimes you don't want to include every single thing because it can be confusing, so I won't include the claws on the other. But remember that there's 5 claws on each foot, each webbed foot of these snapping turtles. It helps it to be an effective predator, grasping at what it's caught. Okay, so I'm adding a little texture with wrinkly skin. You might have a sweater, your mom or dad might have a sweater that's called a turtleneck, and we can see why it might be, because it's the kind of sweater that goes up around your neck and can kind of be wrinkly sometimes. And so on this alligator lizard, it really looks like that, like what you might have on a sweater to keep you really warm in the winter. Okay, so there's our basic snapping turtle. Okay, so we'll start labeling it. First of all, the shell can be from 36 to 50 centimeters when it is grown, which is pretty large. I showed you with the ruler. This is my ruler that is, can't see the whole thing at once, but it's 45 centimeters. So these guys can be even bigger than that. Okay. So that's just the size of the shell. It has a sharp beak, the better to go after its prey, and it has powerful jaws. So you wouldn't want to tease a snapping turtle. Okay. And it's often covered with algae, as I mentioned before. So there's the long tail with sawtooth edges. Five claws on each webbed foot. So this whole thing is the shell. These individual plates are called scutes, S-C-U-T-E-S. The top shell is called the carapace, which we talked about before when we talked about western pond turtles, and the lower shell is called the plastron. Okay, now one more thing you could add in your drawing is the texture of the shell of a snapping turtle is that it kind of forms like V's in a corner of the scute. So you could draw those in to give a better idea of what the shell looks like, and then it's a little bit bumpy on each scoot with these kind of rays or V-like textures. So this is kind of not totally right at the top of the turtle, so you can see a little bit of the edge of on what the other side would be up here. Okay. So that just helps us to give more detail and interest to what's going on with the turtle shell with this snapping turtle. Okay, so oh, I think I mentioned already, but they hibernate in cold weather, deep down in muddy ponds, rivers, or lakes, just like the we talked about, the western pond turtles do that too. Something I read about these guys is that they'll sometimes carry other turtles on their backs, and they can weigh up to 75 pounds, as much as some of you. Pretty hefty. Okay, I'm going to go down here and just draw a little diagram because I think it's interesting to know what the a little bit of what the anatomy or the structure of this snapping turtle can be. I'm going to draw the vertebrae, which are up here at the top of the shell. And this is the neck bones as the turtle is poking out. It's just a very simple diagram just to show you how that works. Their leg bones will go through the openings for the legs and poke out. But when it feels threatened, all of this can go back inside. So here's the back legs poking out. And then the tail. So this long tail. So this is just the bone structure. So this down here is the plastron, the bottom shell. And this is the carapace, the top shell. And then this is the skull. And here's the vertebrae right at the top of the top shell. And ribs. So then all this has the organs of the turtle. So I'll just draw a tiny little drawing of what happens when the turtle retreats into its shell. Here's the head, the skull, back through the opening, and then all the rest of it as well. The tail, and then the legs would be here too. So the neck is designed to curve back into the shell. Anyway, I just think it's interesting how this vertebrae and ribs are right up by the top part of the shell. Okay, so I'm going to use both colored pencils and my paints. Again, this is mixed media where I'm using more than one kind of art supply. And I've got some dark green and some brown and got some different kinds of greens. Depending on what kind of colored pencils you have and how many, you can layer them too. Like if you just have a brown and a green and not different kinds, you can layer one on top of the other. So I'm just going to go over some of my pencil lines with colored pencil, but you can just use colored pencil or just watercolor. I'm just showing you some different ways that you can use art supplies. When you're out in the field, sometimes you might want to take a selection of colored pencils. So I like this green rather than this first one that I started with because it's more earthy, like what the snapping turtle would be like, the color of the snapping turtle. So I'm just coloring some of that in. Here's those, the ridged back. Or kind of scallopy things in the back of the outer rim of the turtle shell. So anyway, when you're drawing a turtle, remember this pattern of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the center, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 on each side. Kind of helps be more accurate. So little drawings like this can help you to understand better what you're drawing. Okay. So now I'm just going to use some watercolor to go over what I just drew in with colored pencil. I'm going to mix some of this really bright green. It's way too bright for this snapping turtle. So I'm going to mix in some oranges and reds to make it more of a muddy-ish green. So the snapping turtle is like a muddy green so that it blends in with its environment. So now I'm just going to kind of paint each one of these scoots. The plates are called, again, scoots. And kind of doing them individually because they are each separate. And then I can go in with some darker color, maybe mix some brown in there. When it dries, I can go back and touch a little bit of the corners just to show some of the texture, that some of it's little raised up a little bit with this pattern here. I'll go ahead and paint in the body, starting with the tail here. The body and the shell aren't that much different color. And into the legs. And onto the head. Looks like the eye is kind of a yellowish color, so you could kind of save that and paint it in the yellow. The underside shell is a little bit yellowish, a little bit different, and so I'll paint that with more of the yellow. Okay, then I can just go back in with my colored pencils and add a little bit more texture if I want to, and just kind of have fun with looking carefully and trying to get an accurate description through my drawing and through my words of this snapping turtle. I can shade with the colored pencil, like under the shell it might be a little bit darker because light's not hitting it as much. So I'm just taking, it'll work better when it's drier to add the colored pencil, but I'm just doing that now. Time's sake. So it's fun to put in more of the texture and the details of this creature. I will paint in that yellowish eye. So there's a little bit more paint than I wanted, so I can just dab that off. Okay, so I'll just keep painting a little bit longer if you want to follow along. And enjoy your investigations about turtles and ponds, and I hope you can go out to an actual pond and see what you can find out there. Next week we'll talk about pond animals and insects. And as always, very fascinating creatures. You could even have a little algae kind of coming off of the head or something too, as he's swimming along.